What's it like living 60 miles from the nearest town? Rancher Rachel Lohof Larsen talks about that and so much more on today's episode of Food, Flowers, and Fun. If you're the woman who does it all, farm work, housework, bookwork, homework, getting up at the break of dawn, this is the podcast for you.
How do you multiply by fractions, Mom?
Get away from the cares of the day. Free stock, root stock, feed stock, seed stock. Chat with women around the world who raise food, flowers, and fun. With your host, Kay Castrataro. That's me. Welcome back to Food, Flowers, and Fun visits with farm women and others from around the world. As always, we are sponsored by Penlight for Farmers, which is helping farmers to create more purposeful lives full of energy, time, and abundance. And today, you are going to love this. If you have ever wanted, I apologize for the cat, everybody. If you have ever wanted to live like 100 years ago in a John Wayne movie, this is the episode for you, because this is Rachel Lohof Larsen. She is the owner of Grounded Life Soil Consulting, and she is basically living the life of a cowgirl. I guess, can I call you a cowgirl? Welcome, Rachel. How are you today?
I'm well, Kay. Thank you for that
So,
introduction.
well, you come from a long line of farmers on both sides. And so tell us a little bit about your background and where you are right now.
Yeah, I am a fifth generation rancher, cattle primarily, at one time sheep on both sides of my family, from northern Wyoming and southeastern Montana, kind of the northern Great Plains region. But I am currently located with my husband where he's employed with a corporate ranching entity in southwestern Idaho, kind of teetering on the edge of the northern Great Basin and the Columbia Plateau. So very different high desert country than where I was raised.
Yeah, so let's talk first of all about the whole, and really the cat is just going to be a nuisance today. But let's talk about the whole idea of this corporate farming. What is that like?
So this is my perspective as a wife and occasional employee. So one thing that's very common in a corporate ranching situation is your housing is tied to your employment. So it's common to provide your employees, because many ranching operations are in very rural, remote areas, like where we're currently at. We are 60 miles from the nearest small town where our post office box is, and 20 miles of that is gravel road. We're currently off the grid, meaning that we rely on solar and a diesel generator to provide us with the electricity and make this call possible. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but the house is also plumbed or piped for propane. So we have propane lanterns and
Yeah,
a propane refrigerator. Don't ask me how
that works.
a refrigerator with a pilot light or a pilot works. I don't know the mechanics of it, but it works really well. And so that's one kind of challenge, I guess. Maybe not challenge is not the right word, but your home is connected to your employment status. And
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's got its pluses and its minuses, I would think. So
yeah,
pluses being you don't actually have a mortgage, I'm assuming, like you don't have to
I
pay
don't
for the house. Do
I don't
you?
have utilities aside from the internet, which I provide for myself because it is connected to the work that I do.
Sure.
So, you're typically paid less than probably someone who's been working and I do consider it. Like, I consider the level of stockmanship and the knowledge and skill involved a profession.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
these are, we're not born contrary to my parents' belief, knowing things. Any child that grows up in agriculture has experienced that, where you just the expectation of
Right.
knowing
The
how
fact
to
that you
do
have to
things,
teach people basic things, like you
right?
just don't, you're not born knowing how to shoe a horse. It doesn't happen. You have to actually learn it. And some of us learn it so early that it seems like we were born with that
Yeah,
knowledge, but
yeah.
we weren't really. So no, I
No,
agree.
we
It's
spend the 10,000 hours in our childhood
right.
for better or worse, there again, there's positives and negatives to that. Um, and then what I find frustrating at this stage in our life where we're experienced and established and consider ourselves stewards of the ranches that we're on is the corporate factor, I guess. You have that
Yeah.
disconnect between management and those people on the ground that are doing the work that is a challenge to navigate in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have some examples of that? Because I think farmers feel that tension no matter what kind of agriculture we're doing. Like the tension tends to be more like government entities, but farmers who rent their land as opposed to owning it, they have similar issues where the landowner might have one set of priorities and the farmer might have a different set. And so you've got, I mean, I think some of that tension happens a lot in agriculture, but I can imagine that in this corporate setting, especially when, like you say, everything is so intimately tied together that, I mean, you lose your job, you lose your house, you lose everything. Like it's a very intensive sort of thing. So what are some of those conflicts that you see, or maybe differences in perspective
I
is a
think
kinder way to put it?
what I witness is a frustration. I'm going to use my husband. I'm going to throw him under the bus as an example here. He doesn't listen to podcasts very often, so I think we're safe. Um, it's the
We're not mentioning any businesses, so we
no
have
name.
no idea who you work for. We're good.
Um, it's the operational knowledge that he has and the relationship that he has with the landscape and the livestock that he works with on a daily basis.
Hmm,
Um, like that's a and any I whether you're a corporate rancher or self-employed or whatever your role in agriculture is, that's a very intimate relationship that many of us have
hmm.
with the animals and the land. Um, and then there's you know, when someone's in an office and it's just numbers within a spreadsheet,
Right.
there's a disconnect. Um, it's something we see a management decision made based on the numbers within a spreadsheet. Um, they're just moving around inanimate objects and to see that in action on the landscape, whether, there's a I'm struggling to find the word here. Welcome to perimenopause and um
Yes, my family has a perimenopause protection protocol that we put into place a couple of days a month because all of a sudden I wake up and I'm like, oh, bad things can happen today. Yes, so
yeah.
I get it. This time of
For
our
me,
lives is
it's
interesting.
my vocabulary is just like poof,
It's okay. It's
vanished.
all right. We're
But
we're
you
we're
come back,
transitioning into different versions of ourselves.
yeah.
And so some of this language stuff is just not essential right now.
I appreciate that perspective. It's circling back. It's the disconnect between people who are moving numbers around on a spreadsheet to someone who is in a relationship, in an intimate relationship with the
Yeah.
landscape and the livestock. Um, and has a different understanding how shifting those numbers, whether it be your stocking density in a particular pasture or allotment or field, the number of replacement heifers that you keep, the age, the running age of your
Yeah.
cattle, like, oh, we're going to retain numbers, someone in the office
Right.
might say, because there's value in that. But when you're there looking at these cattle every day, you're like, are we doing them a disservice in running them in
Right.
these, being a range cow is not a comfortable, cushy life. Like
No.
you need just like being a cowboy, you need a certain level of fitness and maybe youth in some situations to really
Yeah.
thrive in that environment.
Yeah, extra resilience. Yeah, I've had a couple of well, I've got the grass whisperer, Troy Bishop was on once, and we had a beautiful dairy woman as well. And both of them are very passionate about responsively grazing, where you have like this intuitive sense when you look at the pasture of what it can handle, how quickly you need to move animals onto it, off of it, stocking densities, that kind of thing. And that is not something that's static. It's not something, like you
No,
said, it's not something you can put in a spreadsheet because the conditions change so much from day to day, just in the weather and what's happening. And so I can imagine that's got to be really challenging if you're looking at the land and saying the land is only going to tolerate this. We have to do this. But the people who are trying to make, money off of it because it's a business are saying, no, that's not going to work. And maybe not understanding how they can actually make money sometimes with fewer cattle, more
yes,
money with
yeah.
fewer cattle.
And that's just one example. It's like, or like right now, it's December 5th and there's no snow on the ground. Like if our winter continues in this progress, so much of our stock water is dependent upon the moisture that we receive
Hmm.
from now until, April of next year.
Yeah.
And it's more stable when it arrives as snow and then melts slowly in the spring. And
Right. Instead of getting flash flooding and
yes,
yeah.
yeah, you know, so there's all these nuances and as you said, like the conditions are changing every day. And if you're not there observing it daily and engaging with it, um, your
Yeah.
your decision making is going to be different from
Yeah. And so like
witness.
let's talk about that as you as a spouse because your husband very much is a cowboy and you were talking before about like camp and that like
Yeah.
they're camp cowboys and literally like out under the
What
stars.
what is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what that looks like and what is that like for you? Because it really is. I mean, we think about this cowboy image, and for me, that's always been like so romantic. It's
It
so
creates a lot
romantic to,
of romantic idealism attached to that. And
yes, to
I
sit
mean,
around the fire at night and sing, play the harmonica and sing to the cattle to keep them nice and calm. And like it just sounds so bucolic. And yet we all know that when it's I know it's got to be pretty darn cold in Idaho right now. I mean, apparently Keene, New Hampshire was at -8 this morning. So I can imagine that you guys are probably not very warm either. I don't know, but
my husband was raised in eastern Wyoming, and if you know anything about that area, like it's very windy, very cold. I grew up in Montana and northern Wyoming. Um, we call this the banana belt by comparison to the northern Great Plains. That's not to
so,
say we don't
so you're
experience,
soft down there. This
yeah,
is
yeah,
soft
we've got
living.
um it was 19 above yesterday, and I did have to chop ice for cattle and horses before I left to go to town.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that element, but like a camp position is usually more remote than like a I'm there's so many terms that I'm so just like they're just part of our daily lives. I'm
Sure, and
struggling
throw
to
them out
define them.
because I love talking to different types of farmers and ranchers because I learn so much. And so for me, sorry for all of you out there if you don't share my like passion for just learning random things, but I totally just love that. So throw the language at us,
So
give us a little bit of an education. We're good with that.
typically many of the ranches that we've worked on, they have what we call the headquarters, where you
Mhm.
have, your primary housing. In some situations, a cookhouse where there's a cook that cooks for the cowboy crew, and you have crew cowboys who are, uh, it's just a day for cats to be engaged in. They're over
In
here.
trouble, trouble.
Um, and it's a more social and dynamic, you're interacting with people every day, the managers there, and camp cowboys, it's very seasonal in a lot of areas, because of, you know it's generally tied to like a public grazing allotment, either Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management, which has seasons or dates of use. You are provided with your on date, and then depending upon where you're located, then the cattle need to be out of that area. And that's
Sure.
that's common in public lands ranching, is that it's very date driven. Um, and the local or regional offices kind of make that determination based upon precipitation and
Hmm.
the conditions. Um, and so those areas often require trucking, hauling cattle, or trailing cattle a distance from kind of the ranch headquarters.
Hmm.
And there's usually, in most scenarios, it's some sort of off the grid cab, like in the we've worked on BLM or Forest Service permits in the mountains of Wyoming and Montana that were, an off the grid log cabin, kind of the bucolic image.
Yeah.
And then here where we're at in southwestern Idaho, we have more developed houses, but again, because of where they're located, they don't have access to power. So this the camp we live in now is a year-round camp. Hence, we have an electrical generator and power. Many of the more seasonal ones just rely strictly on propane, and then
Okay.
you perhaps fire up a generator to pump water to a storage tank for use,
Right. And then gravity
connected
fed water.
or
Mm.
connected to like at higher elevations. Sometimes they're connected to a spring, and again, it's gravity flow. The camp is constructed in a way that it's downhill from
Yep.
the spring, and then you pipe the spring into the camp. And so that's my husband's passion. He's very hyper independent and self-directed, and so he really thrives in these situations, where he's by himself, or
Yeah.
with his family, which it has worked out, and we've made it work over the last 23 years. In these situations, I've made a lot of compromises for myself personally so that my kids could have this experience and we could all be together,
Mm.
at least in the summer seasons. Some of
Yeah.
the
So let's talk about that because talking about on farm relationships is a big thing of mine. Like I feel like we do a lot of sacrificing for our business, and then especially when you're in a situation like you're describing, you do a lot of personal sacrificing so that the spouse who has a preference for a certain type of agriculture gets to do that. And
yeah.
so, you're talking about he loves being out by himself with the cattle, not interacting with a ton of people. And how has that been for you? I know that you've had some challenges with that. Like you were talking about the generator, and I feel like that generator story that you told me is one that I think is really a great example of what it's like for you to actually be living in the camp while he's off doing his cowboy stuff, and you're like literally holding down the fort. Can you tell that story for us?
Yes. So an, an element of being this remote and relying on the generator for power is that it also we do not have cell phone service or landlines in this area. Um,
Mhm.
you can communicate with a satellite phone. The newer phones now have a satellite texting option, which I'm very excited about. It's worth upgrading the phone this year for that option. It did save me a few weeks ago. When I was my husband was he took a little break and took 5 days off, and I opted to stay home and do the chores and take care of things and focus on my work. And I have rudimentary mechanical skills. Like I can change a tire because I grew
Mhm.
up again in a fairly remote area, where that was, if you were driving, you needed to know how to change your own tires.
Yep.
So
Yeah, because
I,
AAA wasn't going to be there for like two
no,
weeks.
yeah, they're not going to find you. Um, I can check the oil and kind of like troubleshoot some basic stuff, but I'm not a strong mechanic.
Hmm.
And we typically shut the generator off when we're not here. Uh, and again, like I said, we're 60 miles from the nearest small town. So going to get the mail once or twice a week is a 4 or 5 hour expedition because I try to
Yeah.
stack my
Yeah,
errand.
because again, we're talking dirt roads that
Yeah,
are not great roads. So we're not talking about highway driving where you
no,
get on the interstate and 10 minutes you're
no,
down the road.
can't,
No,
can't
that's
hop
not
down
what
the
this
road
is.
to the grocery store very
Right.
easily.
No, and if you go to town, you go to town with a list like
Yeah,
this. I
and
mean,
it's a full
it is
day. It's a
it is
full
very
day
much like
expedition.
I'm thinking Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I don't know if you ever watched that musical, but like when they go to town and they get things for months.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a little I'm
in
exaggerating a little, but
my family, uh, you dressed up too. Like when I was growing up, like it was like you put on your clean, nice clothes and like,
your Sunday go to
well,
meeting clothes.
yes, like it was an occasion as a child. We do it more frequently now, or I feel like we do relative to what I remember growing up with.
Yeah.
Uh, but it is like a full day, like just plan on being gone. So I came back from town and went to fire up the generator after I'd done my outside chores, and I just made like a sad click sound. I'm like, oh. Fortunately, the the neighboring ranches were still out here and still grazing, and gathering cattle as they moved out of the country. And someone pulled in to fuel up because we have the fuel tanks here, like the bulk fuel tanks for all of the neighboring ranches under the same management.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Unfortunately, he was not any more mechanical than myself. And so we troubleshot it for a while and I just gave up. I'm like, I'll be fine. I can do without the phone or internet. If I really need to get a hold of somebody, I have the satellite texting capacity. Um, and then I went out and did side and did my put my chickens away and stuff that evening, and I received a satellite text and he's like, they'll send a mechanic if if you can give it a try, like jump starting it. And I'm mechanic, like here's where my mechanical level begins and ends. I'm like, yes, I can jump start it, but I don't think that's going to solve whatever this issue is. The sound that it made didn't give me like that.
Yeah, it wasn't there's the dead click where it just goes click,
Yeah.
click. And then
It
there's
was
like
like,
the semi-live click where there's like a turn type
yeah,
thing that
there
happens
was
with it.
no, there was no turning. I'm like, whatever it is,
Yes.
it's before we get to the starter. Um,
Yes, yes, my you're maxing out my technical abilities as
yes.
well.
Um, so I, it was, it's November. It's getting dark earlier in the day. So I'm outside in the dark with a pickup. I've got it all hooked up to the jumper cables and I'm like, I'll give it my pretend watch 20 minutes. And if nothing happens, so I was out there and another cowboy on the crew pulled in And he fortunately has more technical skills than myself. And he tapped around and fiddled with stuff after I disconnected it from the jumper cables and was able to kind of pinpoint that it was a solenoid. So
Yep.
it's an electrical issue, and he knew where to tap. Anyhow, we got it fired up. And my husband, he had just left that day. He was gone for 5 days. I just left the generator. I'm like, I'm not, it's beyond my skill level. I've checked the oil.
An object in
It's
motion
good to go.
stays in
Yeah,
motion.
that's my policy. So there's definitely like I lament my lack of self-sufficiency when it comes to these mechanical issues
Mm,
on occasion.
yeah. Yeah, but okay, so I can see that because I'm a single mom, do not live out in the middle of nowhere at all. Like I'm relatively urban. Um, And I still have those moments where there are things that I'd really like to be able to do and I can't. And yet there are many other skills that I do have that makes it so that I have a choice between whether I'm going to, like, am I going to be a good podcast host? Am I going to be a good consultant? Am I going to be a good mom? Or am I going to be a good plumber? And I'm not going to be a good plumber. I'm not going to be a good electrician. I'm not going to be a good mechanic. Like it's not where my passion is. And yet, when you're living out where you are, there's that challenge between like, I have to be able to do certain things, but I also don't want to have to learn all of
Right?
this stuff because
Like,
you have your own business. So talk to me a little bit about your consulting company. And that's it sounds like your mom was like a very self-assured and you know I hate the word feminist, but kind of
I
like women can do whatever women
my
want to
my
do.
mom didn't see limitations for herself uh,
Right.
as a woman in agriculture until systemic limitations were placed upon her. Um, and I guess I was raised with, we observe whether it's expressly taught to us or we learn it by observation. Um, s- but her skill set and her love and passion was for cattle and for
Mm,
horses and stockmanship, handling cattle on horseback, and I I'm very good at that. Not
mhm,
I had to go work for someone else in my late 30s, early 40s to recognize that
mm.
and be like, oh, like I actually do know what I'm doing and I do have this skill and this capacity.
Ooh, what was it about that? So I love that you
It's
brought
the,
this up because I feel like for a lot of us we have that moment and I think women are particularly subject to this like undervaluating
yeah,
undervaluating
the
undervaluing our own
undervaluing.
experience and our
Very,
expertise.
I
And
that feels deeply personal to me.
yeah, so like how was it what was it about that moment that helped you to really start to own what you knew and were capable of?
Up until that moment in which I went to work as a feedlot pen rider for a friend here locally, um, all of my experience was working with my family, whether it was with my mom and my brother and our cow operation that we maintained until 2006, or on the ranch that of my father's family that I grew up on with my family. And what I have come to realize, and um, I wish, like so many things, you wish you had learned this earlier in life. But, you're dealing with a multiple generation and all this inherited generational, um,
Junk.
yeah, trauma and junk and dysregulation, emotional dysregulation.
Yes.
And for some reason, when you're working livestock with that's where it bubbles to the surface. Or in my family, both sides of my family, that's where it would bubble to the
Oh
surface.
yeah, because you could take out your aggression on the animals and feel a little less guilty about it
Yes, you
than
could get
if you were
loud.
taking it out on your kid. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because
I should not admit some of the things that I saw growing up
uh,
with dairy farmers, but like we had rubber hoses, hard rubber hoses that we'd walked in, and I look at it now and I'm like, none of that was necessary. Like
no,
a little bit of changing our mindset,
bringing
we could have
skill
calmed
and a
everything.
shift to that, like how little can I do to achieve the result that I want is something that I've incorporated into my life now.
Yeah. Temple
But
Grandin has got some beautiful stuff on that.
some of my most like when I think back on it, regret filled moments of parenting were when what I experienced as a child came out of my mouth.
Mm,
The obscenity, the whatever it was,
yeah.
working cattle with my children. But fortunately, my mom modeled repair.
Mm.
Um, and
So for
she
those of so
needed
I'm
focus.
loving your language, okay? And I want to pause here for a minute because we're using words like repair and we're using words like dysregulation, which for those of us who have spent a lot of time in more of like a mental health environment, those words are very second nature. And I'm thinking that maybe some of our farmers listening may be a little less familiar with terms like dysregulation and repair. So, can you give an example of what dysregulation looks like in or has looked like in the past in your
But
farm family and an example of repair so that we can normalize this for farmers?
so, for example, we're working cattle in the corral and sorting and you know, in and by, you have a kid running the gate and the adult is sending them cattle and you miss something. Like you don't, and rather than, that's okay, we can fix this. There's an explosion of anger and generally bad language in my family. And a real shaming upon the person or the child that made the mistake in this
Right.
scenario. Um, and that's the dysregulation coming out. Like you're not in a calm, centered state. You didn't take your deep breaths. Like, what's going to happen? We can. It's everything is fixable. Um, and what my mom did model, which I realized as a parent, and the value in it as a parent myself, was those moments would happen. Things would escalate. Things would be said, but we would come back later in the day or in a different, in the evening, she would apologize for that.
Mm,
And if it was something, like often as a parent, she was scared for our safety or well-being, and it came out. It was
yeah.
expressed as anger in that moment. And she would come back and she would apologize. And if it was fear based, she would acknowledge that, I was
Yes.
scared because, and I'm sorry that it came out that way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I will say from personal experience, I've got two kids, and one of the things I did not realize how much my ability to apologize to my kids and to start taking ownership for my own misbehavior, had no idea how powerful that was. My kids will tell me now they're teenagers, so they're 12 and 13. So, typically the age where parents start like pulling their hair out. I might have gotten all my hair pulling out done earlier with my kids, so I could have been lucky with that. I don't know. But they often will tell me, Mom, you always apologize if you do something wrong. And they're like, not everybody does that. And I'm like, no, and a lot of adults are not going to do that because adults have been trained that apologizing to a child is a sign of weakness and
rather
it
than
undermines your authority. And in reality, it establishes a connection and it restores a sense of trust. Oh, the
yeah,
word.
you're in that you're modeling accountability and restoring that connection that you have. And I mean, I was well into adulthood and into my own parenting journey where I realized before I realized how valuable that was to have
Yeah.
seen that in action and know that it's a possibility. And what my son, he's 21 now, but when he was about 13 or 14, I'm like, is there anything I'm doing particularly well as a parent? And he's like, you're really good at apologizing.
Mm,
And I spent a lot of time like, and then I came to that conclusion, like that's accountability in action. That
yeah.
and and it's it's important to me as like a personal value. Like I have had to leave jobs and situations in which I didn't see that model
Modeled.
in
Yeah.
leadership. So
Yeah, and it's so important that in our families, that's where that starts. Like if we can do it in our families, we can do it anywhere. Because like family is the hardest. And I think those
now,
multi-generational families, multi-generational farm families are the hardest because you're right. Like we get a lot of poor modeling that just gets passed on. And it probably started because of a very good reason. Like, nobody wants to harm their kids. Like, that's not what we do. But our ability to communicate gets broken down a lot. And I think farm families are especially susceptible to that because of the high levels of stress and the amount of time we spend together. Like,
it,
get a break.
your work and your family is so integrated. It's really challenging to kind of separate the two and have some boundaries and clarity there. Or that's my experience anyway. I'm
No,
advocating.
absolutely.
But I went to work for a friend at a feed yard and he, I have enough cattle skill. I can recognize sick livestock and do everything. But it was he kind of spent like a morning with me showing me around and then was like, all right, see you later. And I was like,
What are
oh.
you doing?
And as I went through, I'm like, oh, like I know how to do this. Like and just playing with that. I don't know what it was about that environment, but I started seeing the impact of like when I became emotionally dysregulated,
Mm,
trying to get something done independently and the impact it had on my stockmanship.
yeah.
And it really allowed me to work through that and focus on getting centered so I could be a better communicator with the people I am working with in those situations. And it just made things go more smoothly with the animals respond better when I was in a more grounded level place.
Yeah. Well, and this is why animal assisted therapy is so powerful because animals like this one. Anim- Animals don't have the same reasoning capacity that we do. So they just respond to our emotion.
Yeah, you're
They
what
respond to
energy are you
our
using?
bodies and how we're communicating with them, not so much in words even, but the energy that comes out of us. And I was never a big one for energy. I was like, I always looked at this energy thing as being like ooey gooey, like, yeah, that's whatever.
Yeah, you practice it working with livestock or horses or
And
something,
you see
and you
it.
start seeing the impact. And that's like it's like it's a game I play with myself when I'm like, how little can I do to achieve the result I want? Like,
Yes.
and more awareness of where my energy level is at. Um,
Yeah, and just
and a fun
something
journey.
like breathing and just getting like resetting the system then allows you to convey that calmness to others. And like with children, families, if one person, just one person, can take a break and center themselves and get back in regulation, like bring themselves and say, all right, I'm bringing my energy right here. We're going to calm it down
Yeah,
and then we'll deal with you.
hold on.
Then everybody else can be so much calmer. And I really learned it from having a neurodivergent child who was like so dysregulated, so and still is. I mean, he's 13. If he's not on his meds at a certain time of day, like trying to calm him down is ridiculous. But if I try to calm him down when I'm agitated, it ain't
Yeah.
gonna happen. Like the only way it works is if mom stays calm and then I guide him to become calm. So yeah, oh, I love that. And I love how, using the animals to almost keep training yourself on how to do that better and better, because I'm sure it improves your interpersonal relationships.
It really has, and I can't attribute it all to my own work. I had the opportunity. So I left the ranch, went to college. I have a bachelor's degree in environmental science.
Mhm.
Um, and I had grand intentions of coming home, going into graduate school, and then I met my husband, and I things got derailed. I had
Shifted. Things
several,
shifted.
I mean, I've got some semesters under my belt towards teaching high school science, and some, I dabbled, but it became I realized, like, as things were happening in my life, due to grief and other circumstances, I had limited capacity and I wanted my energy focused on my kids and my husband for a
Mm,
while.
yeah.
But a few years ago, I had the opportunity to apply for Nicole Masters, the author of For the Love of Soil. She's a New Zealand agroecologist who's now based in Montana, and she's developed
Mm,
this program called Create, to aid in her, you know, she's highly sought after, but she's trying to transition out of working with clients and training agricultural professionals to utilize her diagnostic framework for soil health. And
yeah.
so I applied for the Integrity Soils Create program and was accepted in 2022. And that's what launched my journey into the consulting business and working directly with clients, because I've honed these observation skills. I have a basic science understanding rooted in my, education, um, and learning how to wrap in some technical science and plant tissue
Yep.
testing into that. And again, like, I undervalued my experience on ranches, observing what was going on. You know, my mom really developed that in me at an early age, these observation skills. She was an avid arrowhead hunter, and really, like, uh loved identifying plants and things like that. So she would take my brother and I on pasture walks, when you're tired of your children and you need to get them outside. But she would invite us to make these observations and ask questions about what we were seeing, and kind of tell stories about our experience on these walks, which is
Mm.
essentially what I do today. I
Yeah, well, and
It's some
integrating that
technical skill.
story is so important. Yeah,
It is.
that's
So that's how I see my role, as a consultant. Like, I do on the ground monitoring, rangeland monitoring, and sample collection and data collection. But I feel like my role really is to bridge that gap between agricultural producers and science and communicate that. And story is a
mm,
really powerful tool.
yes.
And the work that Nicole Masters and Megan Lannon do with Integrity Soils and this Create program is to really deepen your technical skills, but also, your ability to connect and engage. And it does, like, additional regulation tools, because we can't affect change if we are in a dysregulated state.
Yeah, we can't even see potential. I think that is one of the things that I realize is that if you want to affect change, you first of all have to believe that change is possible. And
Yes.
if you're in a place, if you're in that fight, flight, freeze type thing, you don't have that. All you have is survival. And so, like creativity, you can't access that. Um, other people's perspectives. You can't access that. Like your brain literally is like, sorry, I don't care what anybody else is feeling.
Yeah.
Right now, we have to keep you alive,
Put
baby.
in
We got to
front of
keep you
the other.
alive.
Yeah.
And so once you can settle that system down, then you can say, oh, all right, I can make changes. Oh, what happens if I do that? The curiosity has room, that all of that creative problem solving and the ability to look at other people and say, wow, I can see now why you might be reacting in this way. Before I just thought you were a total jerk, but now I can look and realize that you might be behaving like a jerk, but there are actually good reasons why you're reacting this way. And
And,
oh, I
and
just love
how to
that.
depersonalize that,
Yes.
to be so centered within yourself that you can depersonalize that behavior and recognize it for the symptom that it is.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's the journey I've been on since the completion of Create in 2022. Um,
Okay.
and working with clients, I find that most people who contact me feel like they've plateaued or hit it. They want like an action step, like they're kind of
Yeah.
uh, we're struggling with weed issues, like what's the leverage point for them. But it's also opened up the opportunity for me to continue to work with Integrity Soils and Megan Lannon and Nicole Masters. I'm I'm stepping into the student support role for Nicole's online courses. So I will
Oh, great. Moderating the
moderate
classes and
teaching and kind of putting a human face to these online platforms that exist out there. We
yeah.
have what we call the fellowship program as well, or the Integrity Soils Fellowship for former Create students and facilitating that. Um, and it's really valuable to me, not only for the work that I'm doing and the professional development aspect of continuing to work with them, but because they are modeling these
Yeah.
things that they are teaching. And that's it comes back to how we're parenting and seeing that accountability in action. Um,
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about the what Nicole and Megan are doing with Integrity Soils in that role. And
Yeah. And what I'm hearing, and I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, I need longer with you. How can an hour go by so quickly? But but I'm thinking about how you had said in our screening call that you were very much a systems thinker. And as I'm hearing what you're talking about, it really is a systems approach. And that
very
system
much,
is not just systems of ecology, but it's really our global system, like people and the animals and the environment and structures, if you're talking about different platforms and like it really is how do all of the different pieces fit in. And it makes me think of our guest just last week, Zeke Miller, who was talking about the customer experience and how his whole perspective is from a customer experience.
hmm
So not just a customer service, but what happens from the first time somebody becomes acquainted with your brand to the last time they get acquainted with it. And isn't that what we're at as people? Like it's really how we interact with everybody as our own customer experience. Like everybody in a way
yeah,
is a customer.
yeah. And what perception of yourself are you providing them with? Where are you um how are you stepping into that and asking yourself, how am I showing up in this situation? As
And how do I want to? Because if we're
yeah,
not showing up well, like for those of us who have those patterns of dysregulation and unhealthy communications, you know, um, we can show up badly and say, oh, I didn't want to do that. And there is the opportunity to repair and to do something new and to learn. And I'm loving that. So, okay, Rachel, I can already say that we're going to need to get you on next season as well because there's so much that, we didn't even really talk a whole lot about your consulting company. Like, there's so many things that you are bringing to the world, that, I'd love to have more time to share. So, but I will get us ready to wrap up for today. And I'm going to ask you the question I ask all of my guests, which is, if you had one piece of advice that you felt every farmer should know, what would that be?
One piece of advice that every farmer should know. Oh my. It's always going to come back to that regulation piece for me today, based on today's conversation.
Mhm.
Um, it's okay to acknowledge your limitations and recognize that, do I have the capacity for this?
Mm.
Can I take this on? Um, and to be open about those things as well. Like I feel like that's something I'm striving for within my family unit. And this is a tangential, I apologize.
No.
Like I've been working at bringing my father's family to the table for facilitation to have these conversations and work on this. And part of my journey is becoming more regulated and comfortable and centered within myself so that I can sit at that table and be constructive.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
do I have the
Oh gosh. Yeah, we could have a 2-hour conversation on that alone. So,
I'll look back when when I feel like I've made some progress on that journey.
oh, you know what? I like the word progress, and I steal the Weight Watchers phrase, progress, not perfection, because like we just can't get, we're never, if, well, let me rephrase that. If we care about growing, and if we care about becoming the best person that we really can be and showing up the way that we really want to be in the world, we will never attain that. Like, it will be a constant progression towards that. And every single little step we make has like enormous ripple effects. So, I
There's
mean,
a learning in that, becoming comfortable with that it's going to be a perpetual journey once you start down that path. It-
yes. Yeah, there is a whole mindset shift of
yeah,
being okay with not being okay. Like, so, thank you so much, Rachel. I have loved having you here, and really look forward to the next time we chat. And thank all of you out there for joining us on Food, Flowers, and Fun. We'll see you next time.
thank you
Bye.
all. Thank you, Kate.
How do you multiply by fractions now?
Farmers calling, our show is all done. Goodbye, farewell, so long, adieu. See you next week, same time, same place for Food, Flowers, and Fun. Go in peace. Visit us at www.penlightfarmers.com.